I got notes and things to talk about and stuff to say, and I say we do this thing. And
I
we
agree.
are gonna get started in 3, 2, 1.
I do hope that Mr. Wick finds his way to safety.
He knew the rules, he broke them. He killed a man on company grounds for all.
Do you expect him to make it out?
$14 million bounty on his head. Every interested party in the city wants a piece of it. I'd say the odds are about even.
Hello and welcome. Welcome and hello. This is Wait, You Haven't Seen. It's a show where we talk about movies and specifically talk about a movie at least one of us has never seen before. I'm your host, Travis, a.k.a. TV's Travis, and this is episode number 209. And our movie this week is John Wick, Chapter 3, Parabellum. Joining me to talk about it, because he hadn't seen it before, and I hadn't either, is Cyrenix from The Part-Time Gamers. How you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good, and just continuing on since we talked about John Wick 2. Figured might as well talk about John Wick 3. So
Yeah, you got a hold of me. It was like, hey, we need to do John Wick 3. Chapter 4 is coming out soon. It makes sense. I think Chapter 4 comes out next week.
Next week, yeah.
By the time this
that.
episode goes live, you'll be able to go, you'll be like a day away from being able to go see John Wick Chapter 4. And I'd also been getting like crap from friends of mine. One of my friends is like, you haven't watched Chapter 3 yet? It's got your boy in it. I'm like, I know. I'm like, I've been saving it. And so here we are to see it. So we watched Chapter 2 together for the show.
Well, yeah.
And I saw John Wick, the first John Wick, a few years ago. It was probably like a year or two after it had come out when I saw the first one. And it was one of those that had completely slipped under my radar. And then I was like, oh, Keanu Reeves is in some action movie that I keep hearing good things about. Let's watch it. And at the end of it, I was like, more. I need more. Just shoot it into my veins directly. They give us Chapter 2 and it expands on it. We talked a lot about the expansion of the world. Because the first movie was a nice self-contained little story. And if it had never gone beyond that, perfect. But they did things really well. And now Chapter 3 picks up right after the second movie.
Like literally 10 minutes after the end of the second movie.
Yeah. And, whew, boy.
Yeah. And actually on that whole factor of time, one thing that is, I think, important to note is so far even though the movie's been spread out over several years for their production and everything, actually in the story, the whole thing so far has taken place in about 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's around there.
So he's probably, like, when we're going through all the details of what's going on in this movie, he's probably still healing from the wounds that were inflicted on him in the first movie.
Listen, obviously this is a universe inhabited by superhuman beings that can take John Wick being the most superhuman of any of them. Like, he is... He is nigh invulnerable. I mean, he takes damage, he gets hurt, but it's like Deadpool wishes he had the healing factor of John Wick. Okay.
Yeah, I actually, at the end of my notes, I wrote that he has plot armor plus 20.
Yes.
So.
I love, so the movie kicks off, like you said, 10 minutes after. So Chapter 2 ended with John had killed the guy on the Continental grounds, and Winston, who runs it, the manager, is like, all right, dude, you messed up. I'm going to give you an hour, but you're going to be excommunicated. Everyone's going to be coming after you. And John was like, look, I get it, and thank you, I'm out. And he takes off with his dog. And so we pick up that 10 minutes later, and he's just running through New York with the dog. I love that dog, by the way. That dog was awesome. And the dog's just trotting next to him, and he's running, and he's doing the Keanu Reeves run, which is like, the run of somebody who has broken both of their ankles several times and is now in his 50s. Like, it's really funny because Keanu Reeves is in such good shape in this movie. He does so much amazing stunt work and choreography, but he definitely still moves like a 50-something-year-old dude that has been through the ringer. And I love that. It actually makes the character like more endearing to me to see that.
And there's one thing kind of in line with that is one of the things that we'll expand on my point in a little bit when we get later on, but just right up front, so far of the 3 John Wick movies, this is my least favorite. But that's saying, like, if the first 2 John Wick movies are 9s, this is like an 8.5.
Mm-hmm.
You know, saying it's the worst of the 3, doesn't really mean a whole lot. But there's a little bit of one of the reasons why the first 2 movies were so good is because of how grounded the combat was. Like, you could count the number of bullets and they would match the guns.
Mm-hmm.
They would, that kind of stuff. He was very efficient. There was very few superfluous moves in his technique. They basically double tap to the chest, 1 shot to the head, move on. There's a little bit of a loss of that in this movie.
There was
not much.
It's slight. I did notice it. There was at one point I'm like, wow, we're not seeing him reload as much. But part of that was, I think that in the effort to continue to evolve the action and not let it become stagnant, Chad Stahelski and the stunt team and Keanu and everybody wanted to change things up. Because one thing I did notice with this movie was there was a lot more one on several type fights. Yeah. Instead of, like, we saw in the first movie, there was definitely like the nightclub and he goes in there and he takes everybody out. But there again, it's him. It's like one person at a time, and he just methodically moves through. Whereas we got more of kind of the kind of gang pile on him. And then
which makes sense because of the $14 million goes up to $15 million bounty on him. Everyone is going after him at the same time.
Yeah. Not only that, but then the introduction of the tables people at the end that have the different armor. So he's got that changed that whole encounter. We'll get to that in a little bit, but that whole encounter was then structured and done completely differently from anything we had seen in John Wick to this point. So I get what you're saying, and you're right. There was a little loss of that, but it's kind of like, yes, but at the same time, we also lost a little bit of the grounding in that John gets even more stabbed and broken in this one, and just like, he took a couple pills from the doctor. Fine, no problem anymore.
And granted, like, even if there was any other action series, like if this was like Expendables or whatever like that, wouldn't even be noticed or anything. But because it's John Wick and it has that pedigree of being like the specific kind of combat and everything, it was noticeable. But like I said, if the first 2 were 9s, this is an 8.5 in my mind. It's still really good.
And I will say the only time I really felt the like we're not counting the rounds hitting the ground type thing was really just the fight with him and Halle Berry against all the soldier dudes in Morocco. Because
to a degree,
if you think about it, like, so we start off, he's running in the rain. He ends up at the public library, and because he finds a cab, and I love that moment where he gets the cab, and he starts off, and he's like, "Get me to the Continental," and the guy says, "Sure," and then it's New York traffic. You're not going anywhere. So he gives him the gold coin and to get the dog to the Continental, and he takes off on foot to get to the library instead.
And in regards to that, also, I have a little bit of a theory, just kind of like a world building theory. Because we mentioned in John Wick 2, they just go into all out gunfights in the middle of a crowd and nobody reacts.
Yeah.
And I think it's because it's like the general public knows at least that these organizations exist. They might not know specifics, like of its structure or anything, but they know that there's like weird stuff like this just happens from time to time. And it's become something that's just so kind of commonplace that they're just like, oh, whatever, it doesn't involve me. I'm just going to cross the street over here.
Could be, yeah.
Because like, and you also don't know how far it extends, because obviously this cab driver is just, as far as we know, just a normal cab driver. but he still knows what to do with the gold coins.
Well, yes and no, in that if you noticed, he was a yellow cab, but his was an old school looking cab, and all the other cabs on the street were a much more modern model of car. Okay. They looked more like your Crown Vics or whatever would be a yellow cab on the street today, and this looked like a yellow cab from like the 50s. And one of the things they've done in this world is this mishmash of like, we've got technology, we've got people with PDAs and smartphones and like the slider phones and all that, but then they're entering in all their information on a Commodore VIC-20 with an old green and black monitor. So I feel like I felt
that was a distinguishing factor, was the model of the cab.
Yeah, that cab looked like an old cab, and I think that that's why John got in, was he knew it was a friendly cab. But yeah, so
I could see that.
So then John heads to the library, and we get our first like real action scene where he goes into the library, and I love this because he's on a time crunch, right? So he's constantly checking his watch, and he gets in there, and there's somebody in front of him in line. He's like, and he goes up and he asks for a very specific book, and then we have to stand there and wait with him while the woman looks up the book and writes it down for him on where to go, and like. It's John Wick is almost polite to a fault because he doesn't flip out on her, and he goes up and he finds the book, and then we have like to kick off this movie action wise with a fight with Keanu Reeves and NBA player Boban Marjanovic.
Yeah,
just
7'4". Yeah,
7'4". And he's an NBA player, so he's obviously pretty agile. But I just liked him. Like I thought he had a nice screen presence, and it was just funny to see. Like he comes walking up, and he's just like, "You really don't want to do this." He's like, $14 million, gonna do it, and they just have the fight right there in the library, and it was. I had like,
it was brutal
by the end of it because he's using that book, and I've seen that type of maneuver before. With the use of the book. I remember there was a Jason Bourne, I think it was Bourne Ultimatum, where he had a fight and he had a book that he grabbed, and same thing, he would put it up against the person's face or the side of him or something and punch that and let that kind of transfer the energy through. But then he takes and he breaks the dude's jaw with the book.
Yeah.
And then, I was like, okay, all right. So this is where we're going. They're holding nothing back.
There's definitely a lot more brutality in this one, seemingly, compared to the last two.
Which kind of makes sense because the stakes are going up for him. And a lot of this movie is John dealing with kind of two halves of himself that we'll kind of get to. But after that, he ends up at the doctor, which was great to see Randall Duck Kim back as the doctor. Even in that short part, but I loved him at the end. They're never going to believe that I stopped, so you're going to have to shoot me. But
also, we forgot to mention why he went to the library.
Oh well, yeah, he had.
He had hidden I believe a marker and a rosary in the book. Yeah, it was a secret compartment. I mean that becomes important later on. So I just wanted to make sure we didn't gloss over that.
Yeah, but there's so many like little things, little moments in this that you don't think about, and then as they're happening, but then when you look back on it, you're like, oh, that's a really cool, just little detail. And one of my favorites was when he goes to the doctor, he's got 10 minutes before his time is up, and everyone knows this, even including the doctor, who's just like, no, I can't help you. You're excommunicado. He's like, I got 10 minutes. Just let me in. And so he's doing the suturing. And the doctor stops right at the time. So John finishes it up. But as he's getting ready to leave, he's like, look, nobody's going to believe that I stopped. And they're going to know that I pointed out where the medicine is or whatever. He's like, you're going to have to shoot me to make it seem realistic. But then he's smart enough to take and get his clothes out of the way.
Yeah.
So that there aren't fibers from his clothes that he would have the problem of getting something infected from. He just has to worry about the bullet. I'm like, that's a smart move by a doctor would think that. That's something a doctor would actually think of. So I thought that was kind of cool.
And I also thought it was kind of amusing the fact that John didn't even wait for him to finish his sentence before he shot him. It's like, I know what you're going to say. I'm a surgeon with a bullet. So yeah.
It's like, I don't have time for this.
Yeah.
But all right, so cast of this movie, they have done such a good job casting all three of these movies so far. Because you bring back Keanu, who is great, and you bring back Ian McShane as Winston and Lance Reddick as Sharon, aka the concierge.
And this is actually the first movie they actually say his name.
Yes,
they never mentioned his name in the first two movies.
Nope, he's just the concierge. So real quick, because it just happened, I want to have a moment and just mention Lance Reddick. Sadly passed away this week, and suddenly he was only 60 years old. And honestly, if all you know him from are these movies, that's fantastic. But he had such a great career, going all the way back to some stuff in the late 90s. He was on Oz. He was on The Wire. I remember my first vivid memories of him. I'd seen him pop up and stuff here and there, but I never really knew who he was. And then I started watching Fringe, where he was Philip Broyles, and he was great. He's got a great presence to him. He's a great voice actor. If you ever played Destiny, you've heard his voice. He's also he got to play a role in a game I played a year or two ago called Quantum Break. That was a really cool video game because it had these live action television series segments in it that you would watch, and he was playing a character in that. Lance Reddick was great. He's also damn hilarious. He is a funny dude, and he didn't get to do a lot of comedy roles, but whenever he would get to do something funny, it was always brilliant. But he's great in these movies. He's in Chapter 4. They did finish that already, so
in fact, he was on the promotional tour for Chapter 4 when he passed.
Yeah. So just a moment to remember Lance Reddick and just what he was, and by all accounts, everything that you see, great person too.
Yeah.
And he brought something to a role that's very, very minor in terms of the scope of the John Wick films, but there is something to having an actor who has a presence, and then he got to play around with having a bit of I think it was a Kenyan accent. And that just gave a little flavor to the concierge that I liked. It was just it was a fun role for him to get to play. And it kind of got a little bit bigger with each successive movie, which is always fun for an actor. He was great. Keanu, look, just kills it. He's so good in this role. And the thing you hear people say, and it's true, and this is, I think, over time, what Keanu Reeves figured out about himself in films, and what I have come to appreciate more about him, is that he knows how to emote and how to get across information without dialogue. And
agreed. Yeah.
I don't like to rag on actors too much, but there are times where actors just don't do a great job. Like Bram Stoker's Dracula. Keanu Reeves, love you, but the accent was terrible. And if you go back and watch, I'm sure he watched it, or if he could even watch it, and would be like, yeah, no, that's bad. But it's like over time he sort of figured out that thing that he was really good at, and he can put that into a movie now. And like John Wick is such a good character for him because there's a lot going on, but he's a character who doesn't have to speak a whole lot. And apparently that's what Keanu is like. A lot of people have said he's not he's a quiet guy, but he just, and clearly one of the nicest people walking the earth.
Well, after Lance passed, I saw that on Twitter you posted the little excerpt about how Keanu, who wasn't even supposed to be on the set, came in on the set on his birthday in order to give Lance a card of some kind, and even things like that, and even from the past, stories of how actually legitimately kind and nice Keanu is towards other people in general is impressive in Hollywood these days.
Oh yeah, and just making sure that whatever he makes his money, but he makes sure that the people that he works with and cast and crew, are well taken care of, and he just seems like just a genuinely good dude. But he also puts so much work into these roles at his age to be able to do what he does and put he worked. I think he trained for 4 months before they started filming Chapter 3 because they were doing some new stuff in this, and there was extra things that he needed to work on. And because they do so much of these long takes too, you not only have to work out, but you've got to get your cardio to be able to do long takes and resets and do more than one take. And to your point, you mentioned the kind of realism earlier, and even if it's not like the exact number of shots per magazine and reload and all that we saw in the first movie, like it's not quite as precise, his movements are still always the tactically correct movements that you would expect, and
with a few exceptions, but I would agree.
And even
very, very few exceptions.
And even some of those exceptions are kind of like, oh, well, I wouldn't have done it that way, but I kind of see what he's doing.
To a degree, yeah. There's like one specific instance where I think was a little bit of excessive, but one out of an entire movie is not barely even I think because it was only one out of the entire movie, it's why it was so noticeable to me.
That could be.
But yeah.
But
we'll get to that later.
Yeah, but then he brings a good there's an emotion that he can give you without having to overact. He's a very efficient actor in that way, and this type of character I think works for him. These kind of stoic or silent type protagonists that he can play, or antagonist if he wanted to, I'm sure. It's just hard to picture him being a bad guy at this point.
True.
But it's just one of those things where he's so good at giving you emotion without dialogue or playing off of what someone else says and just kind of having a answer that works. And then on top of that, in this movie, he's kind of fighting two parts of himself now, because we've had glimpses of that, right? Where he was out and then he has to come back. So by the end of the first movie, we've got the John that was out is now back to being John Wick. In the second movie, he's kind of really embracing that and going for it. And now here he's back to fighting it a little bit of like John versus John Wick.
Yeah, trying to that becomes a question, especially later on, with the encounter with too many W's with Winston. About it's like, why are you doing this? Why do you want to continue living? Mm-hmm. And that he really has to wrestle with that. It's like, there's even a reference to once we get to the Russian theater, there's actually a reference to similar kind of that Native American proverb of the two wolves.
Yep.
And it's like the evil one, the good one, which one wins? Whichever one you feed.
Yep.
So that just from that subtle bit as well, you can tell that that's going to be kind of a theme throughout the rest of that, at least this movie, and probably potentially into the next one. Yeah.
And it's that whole idea of like, okay, so is he going to, in order for him to continue to live at this point, he has to embrace the John Wick, the Baba Yaga, the boogeyman aspect of things. But all he wants is to go back to being John and just go chill with dog.
Which still does not have a name.
Nope, still doesn't have a name. But just go chill with dog and remember his wife. And so he's got to fight with those two things, and just everyone and everything is in his way to do that. And we get some interesting fights going on in this too that I definitely want to get to.
Yeah.
But there's this so much more of this cast. Like Ian McShane as Winston is always good in everything that he does, because he brings a gravitas to his roles, like a weight to them. Yeah. But with this role of Winston, he has for the most part always seemed to be on John's side, but never like, it's always been sort of not necessarily tenuous, but like, I'm on your side because it benefits me.
Yeah.
To a point. And that's where sort of the end of this movie was a little strange for me, and I'm still trying to work out exactly what I think about what happened there. Because it feels like both a heel turn on his part and sort of going against John, but also like he kind of knew that John would survive in a way.
Yeah, I think that's the important part, especially because especially at that close range, he could have shot John in the head and just ended it there.
Mm-hmm.
But he specifically shoots him in the protective jacket.
Yeah.
And, knocks him off the roof. So, and we've already proven that John can defeat the world by sheer will alone. So
apparently,
yeah.
So but Ian McShane in this gets to do a little bit more, which is nice. He's presented with you're going to be replaced as the manager of the Continental, and that is a huge thing because to this point especially, he has been the Continental. In the first movie, he is the highest level we see. And then in the second movie, we get exposed to the table and sort of realize that he has people he answers to. And now we're seeing the consequences of what he did at the end of that movie.
With the adjudicator.
Yeah, and the adjudicator was another one of those really, really interesting roles, and that was an actor by the name of Asia Kate Dillon.
Yes.
Who I was unfamiliar with, but I never saw. I guess the big role that they were in was Billions. And then Orange is the New Black.
I think Orange is the New Black. Yeah,
which I never really watched either. But
neither did I.
But man, Asia Kate Dillon did a great job of playing this role, which is coming in and being somehow this new character has to come in and be intimidating to all of these characters without it feeling cheap or forced.
Yeah. And Kate and Asia is not an imposing figure.
No.
They are very, just not imposing at all, but just has this presence, this just posture of I'm the most powerful person in this room and everyone knows it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And just by putting that little coin on the table and just sliding it over to Sharon, it's like everyone knows, like, okay, this is not going to end well for someone.
Yeah, no, it's impressive to not be physically imposing, and not have, but there was something with the way the costuming was and the way that they carried themselves in this role. And it worked, and it was such a great. And this is, you bring it up perfectly when you say the most powerful person in the room. In rooms full of incredibly powerful people, like everyone everyone they run into, is like head of whatever area they are currently presiding over, and the adjudicator's just like, doesn't matter. I make the rule. Like I make a call and it happens, and that's it.
Yeah.
And it was a fantastic job in that role.
Yeah.
And a really cool role to bring into all of this.
Yeah, because up until this point, we've heard of the high table, but we've never really seen any of the actions or anything like any interaction with the high table. This is the first time we've really started to see this high table organization that kind of oversees everything.
Yeah,
and just Asia's, like we were saying, Asia's presence in this whole situation kind of conveys the power that the high table has over everyone else, because Asia is more or less kind of relatively low ranking on the high table and is still above everyone else.
Yeah. So, and doesn't need to have a name, and just can show up and make everybody quake in their boots as soon as they see that coin that denotes they are an adjudicator. That's it. It's over. Like they're just like, oh, okay, I gotta follow the rules. So it's really great work. Lawrence Fishburne back as the Bowery King,
course.
which is, you can tell he's just having fun. Like he is just loving playing this role, getting to be just a little bit crazy. Again, not a huge amount of screen time, but a lot of important moments.
And it definitely sets him up as a major player in the next movie too.
Yes. I really, really liked how the Bowery King doesn't care about the adjudicator. He's the one person who the adjudicator shows up and he's just like, whatever, go away. Like, you have no control over me. And ends up in a rough spot because of it. But that was the cool, like that gives you, again, it gives you sort of a sense of this world of like the Continental is very straight-laced, follow the rules, all of that. And you get Winston is like, I don't think I want to do what you're telling me. And the Bowery is dirty and scummy, and he's got people everywhere, and the adjudicator shows up and he's just like, no.
Yeah, whatever.
So yeah, that's some fun stuff there. Angelica Houston as the director when John goes to the Russian theater, which had it was called The Two Wolves, I think.
Yeah.
I saw that and I was like, oh, that's a nice little just a subtle thing they can throw in the background. And then he goes inside and there's Angelica Houston and she's directing and the girl that was on stage, the ballerina in that was an actual, she's a ballerina, and she said like, that's kind of how it goes. Like you're doing that move and you're just doing it over and over. And
and kind of along those lines, like eventually they go backstage and they see some of the other ballerinas, and I just have a note in here that says toenails are for the weak.
I had a note of like, I'm covering this part of the screen up for a moment because I know what's going to happen there, and I don't need to watch that.
We also we kind of skipped over some action scenes too.
Well, we're going to get to. I have to mention these actors because if I don't, I will forget. We're coming back to action for sure. But like seeing Angelica Houston, who I haven't seen in anything in a while, and I will always think of her as Morticia Addams because that made such an impact. That movie made such an impact on me as a kid. It was like I was the perfect age for her as Morticia, Raul Julia as Gomez, and just the Addams Family movie in general. But she's so good in this in the small amount of time she gets because, once again, she has a presence to her. It's also great to name her character the director when her dad, John Huston, was a director. I kind of like that. And her mother was a ballet dancer too, so she's a director of a ballet. Like, it's kind of nice.
Yeah, I find it kind of interesting how much more imposing someone can be when they don't have a name; they just have a title.
Yeah,
because that happens quite a bit in this as well. You have the adjudicator, no other name. You have the director, no other name. Later on, you have the elder, no other name. It's just like that somehow makes them more imposing without even ever seeing them.
Because I think part of that is without a name, you don't have a person to put to that. All you have is the job that they're doing.
You have an entity.
And
position.
And so without a name, it's hard to then kind of wrap your head around them having any humanity. They are just that thing rather than a person. So it's not, it's not Kathy the director. It's just the director. The director. And therefore, and her scenes are great because we learn that John's name isn't originally John.
Giordani
Jovanovic.
I'm butchering this. Yes, that one.
And we learn that he was from a tribe of people somewhere in Belarus is the way that it goes there. Which is, again, it's that world building. It's those little crumbs of stuff. Like we learn a little bit more of that because the first time we see the rosary in the book, it's just it's a cross.
Yeah.
It's a rosary, but he walks in and the director just looks at him like, "What are you doing here?" And he shows the rosary and she's like, "You're showing me this like it means something." Even though she knows full well what it is. And then we find out that's his ticket. And then that alone again, there's all this like ritual to this world. And in this case, it was the rosary, and he keeps talking about having his ticket, and it's like a safe passage or a sanctuary. But then, and I loved the idea that she even says, "I will tear your ticket."
Yeah.
And then the physical act of removing that cross from the rosary beads. I was like, okay, we're not just using language, like that's part of this ritual. Then to brand it on him, I'm like, oh man,
Yeah.
this guy.
Yeah, that's like, why do all of these rituals and vows and all these things, why do they have to be so painful? It's like you get branded, you get, just later on we have fingers cut off, and just like, oh,
so
why
much
is
of it.
All of them.
But when you're watching the movie, how visceral is that? You get the gravity of what's going on based on
that these are things that should not be taken lightly.
Mm-hmm. Because
the fact that John is going through with this stuff shows like how desperate he is.
Mm-hmm. And the resolve that he has, because he's going to endure these things. Because it's not just that the director is going to give him safe passage to where he's trying to get to, which in this case is Casablanca. It's the fact that he gets this one time. He's cashing that in, and he is now marked for life with that brand that he can never use that again. And so that's pretty heavy. And then last actor I really want to talk about, Mark Dacascos.
Yeah.
Because I am an unabashed fan of Mark Dacascos. I have been since I first saw. So I remember, in retrospect, I remember seeing him in Double Dragon, way back. He was one of the brothers. But the first like conscious memory I have of watching a movie of his was this movie called Only the Strong. It came out in the mid '90s. Okay. He plays like he's a Marine that was stationed in Brazil and ends up coming home. He was from like Miami, and he comes home, and the school that he went to is all run down. It's like inner city drug kids. It's sort of a Dangerous Minds type setup, and he ends up getting involved with some of these kids in like an after school program to teach them martial arts as a way to kind of get them on the straight and narrow a little bit while there's like a drug problem going on. So it's a cheesy 90s action movie, but it was my introduction to Mark Dacascos, and it was my introduction to the Brazilian martial art of capoeira, which if you've ever seen that, is one of the most amazing things to watch, because the whole point of capoeira, and I trained it a little bit in high school, very, very, very briefly, but the whole point of it while you're practicing is to not actually make contact and to keep the game going and keep moving. And it's a lot of flips and handstands, and it's beautiful to watch. And I saw that movie and I was like, this guy's awesome. And I've followed his career ever since then. Like I saw, I would watch The Crow Stairway to Heaven, which was a series they made that started off with the original story from the first Crow movie, and I think it ran for like a season. He was Eric Draven in that. He went on to be the chairman on Iron Chef America, which is where most people have seen him.
Which also in my notes, I as soon as I saw him, the first thing that came to mind was Iron Chef Assassin.
Mm-hmm.
And I just was amused by that.
And because I've been a fan of his for so long, I've seen interviews with. I remember he was interviewed on Alton Brown's podcast years ago because they became friends from Iron Chef America, and he was telling stories about when he was living. It was somewhere, I don't remember exactly what country it was, if it was the Philippines or Indonesia, somewhere in Asia, but he would he made enough money doing whatever it was that he was doing that he could either take the bus and not eat for the day because he could afford a bus ticket, or he could have food, but he'd have to walk to and from. So he had to make he had to make that, because they were talking about Alton was asking him about getting to sit down at the table and have these meals brought out to him as the chairman from Iron Chef America, and just how crazy that has to be. And he's relaying the story of like, yeah, no, it's still weird for me to go through because I had to at one point in my life decide if I was going to walk and be tired but could eat, or be hungry but not have to walk, the several miles one way twice a day. So, it's little things like that. But then you see how good of a martial artist he is, and he's funny. And then this character killed me. Now I have to ask: Did you like the character of Zero, first of all?
I did. I thought it was a very interesting kind of spectrum with him, because he's obviously very skilled in what he does.
Mm-hmm.
But he also, in the midst of him being very skilled and being charged with killing John Wick, he just fanboys all the time, and I find it incredibly amusing. And it's like one other thing that I thought was kind of amusing when the adjudicator meets with him to hire him, basically, and he has this very kind of stereotypical Japanese accent when he's doing his sushi and everything like that. And then she puts the coin on the table, pushes it over. He immediately drops the accent because he knows she's not a customer anymore.
Yep. And
just talks with her in plain English. I was kind of amused by that, but yeah, I think he's a very interesting character because he has he's almost like, he has obviously the skill, but he's also like very childish at times. And I just thought it was an interesting kind of.
It was fun because in the first movie we had Adrienne Palicki and her assassin character who like knew who John was, but her thing was trying to prove herself, and her proving herself was going to be taking down John Wick.
Yeah.
And that obviously doesn't go so well for her. In the second movie, he deals with Common and his character, who they have some history.
Cassian,
yeah, Cassian, and they have some history. They know each other, and so there's like a mutual respect, but also kind of mutual like dislike for each other at the same time.
Yeah,
they were like two junkyard dogs, kind of circling each other all the time. Like, yeah, okay,
yeah,
I know who you are. I know you're good at what you do, but I don't like you. And like, if I have the chance to kill you, I will. Type of thing.
Yeah.
Zero was cool because he was kind of a mix of both of those, while also being like the kid that is looking up to his idol. And it was the moment. So first, when the adjudicator first walks up to him and he drops the accent, I love that. And he gives her the blowfish and she eats it.
Yeah.
That's a fun scene. He's got his cat there, right? He's feeding the cat and all that. But when he sits down next to him, after they have the whole action scene leading up to the Continental, and John puts his hand on the stoop of the Continental, and that's enough to get everything to stop because Sharon happens to be right there. When they go inside, and John sits down, and you see him, and then he makes it a point to go all the way over and sit uncomfortably close to John. And John Wick just kind of looks at him, gets up, moves to the other chair, and then it goes from like this weird, because up to this point he's been very stoic and like very kind of hardcore.
Yeah.
And we saw one little crack when they were at Grand Central, when they were walking up to each other with the knives, and then the kids come walking in front of them, and they both stop, and they're just sitting there staring at each other. And he's like, "See, that's the difference between you and me. I wouldn't have stopped." But he's still like very hardcore. And then you get this moment where he sits down next to him uncomfortably close, and you're like, what is going on here? And then he just breaks all of it and goes straight fanboy. Like, I have been wanting to meet you for... And I was just like, I love this character even more. It's ridiculous. And he plays it with just like, there's this childlike energy and exuberance that he has. And like this just...
Yeah.
He's getting to hang out with his idol and like try to kill his idol. And for him, that is the greatest honor he could have. And it's so
which is
great.
It also kind of shows like how this assassin organization kind of works. It's like, if they commission you to, kill your own parents, that's part of the job basically. So it's like, you can have your fanboys and everything. You can have all that, but it's like, when it comes down to it, it's business. So as soon as they leave the Continental, it's back to shooting at each other, or in this case, trying to stab each other.
Yeah.
But I'm amused by that. I love the fanboying in it.
I honestly was not expecting that, and I think that's what made it so much better. Is just all of a sudden he goes fanboy, and he's like, "Yeah, I want to fight you." No, the whole thing where he kills the one dude, and he's like, "Nobody kills you but me. My blade will be the one that kills you." Like, but he's so excited to be fighting with John, and there's the great moment, and I definitely have an audio clip I'm going to play in a little bit of the two of them after their fight. It's so good, but Mark Dacascos, plus Mark Dacascos is he is. I think the same age or a couple of years, might even be a couple of years older than Keanu Reeves.
Yeah.
And it's amazing the way that guy can move still, because he is in his 50s. In fact, he is 55 years old when they made this movie.
Okay.
So at 55 to do what he did is phenomenal. He's in incredible shape, and he can go over the top goofy, and it works. He's just got like, it's sort of funny too, because he's kind of the opposite of Keanu Reeves in that way, whereas Keanu is very, very closed off and very stoic, and it's almost like they cast the perfect actor who tries to be that until he gets near John, and then he's just like, I can't hold it back anymore. He's like vibrating with excitement.
Yeah, Mark is he's much more animated when he's not being serious.
Yep.
I agree. That's the perfect kind of opposition to John's character, who's just stoic all the time.
Absolutely. I didn't mention, and I should have, Halle Berry as Sophia.
Yes.
I didn't realize she was in this. And I thought that was a really great moment to bring her in. So if I have a problem with the movie, it's not Halle Berry, it's not her character, it's that part of the movie felt like it was a little bit unnecessary or just went a little too long. And here's my reasoning for that. He has to go through a lot to get to Halle Berry and her character. And he meets with her. And that is a stepping stone to get to her former boss in the assassin world, which is a stepping stone to get to the Elder. And it just felt like we were at that point. It's not bad at all. But if I were to redo anything like this, I would have trimmed that part down and maybe removed one step from that.
Yeah, because theoretically, if you could have completely eliminated Sophia's part from the movie and just have him go directly to her boss, because after that she's not in the movie at all.
Right. Or she could be that boss that he gets to in Morocco, and that, because basically he goes to Morocco to see her, to go to her boss, to go to the Elder, and we could have cut one link out of that chain. And if we're going to do any of that, I would get rid of the character of Barada over her, because I think her character was interesting. Now, how are they going to get a fight scene involving Sophia and John against a bunch of people? There, you'd have to do something with the Elder. There'd be some restructuring, but like, that's just and this is nitpicking. This is like knocking it down a quarter of a point or half a star. Like, it's nothing, because, well, I tell you what, having Halle Berry in this movie gives you a great actor, and she went through all sorts of training too. I saw so many interviews of her saying like, this is the most work I've ever done for a movie. This is the hardest stuff I've ever done for a movie. I got to keep up with Keanu, which is not easy.
And not only that, she had to train with the dogs.
Yeah.
I think in the trivia it said that the dog trainers, normally the dog trainers are just off camera directing the dogs and everything like that. But she had trained so much with them that the dogs saw her as their trainer.
Yeah. And
so she had to go through all of that training too.
Just getting to like 3 months of training those Malinois was just amazing.
Yes, that's how it's pronounced. Okay. I was wondering that.
And those dogs were awesome. Like, and that was such a cool layer to add to that scene, because here again, as we're talking about how they were up the action in this, and we've now got John and somebody working with him, and they're taking on basically an entire compound worth of people.
Oh yeah.
But they also add in the layer of the dogs, and it's all Chad Stahelski loves to do these long shots in his action sequences, and we talked about that in 2, and I remember saying it in 1, where it's so much of it's not up close and shaky and quick cuts. It's pulling the camera back, giving us a long take, seeing the actors doing the action. You're seeing Halle Berry and Keanu Reeves and Lance Reddick and all these people in these action sequences doing all of this work. So they've got to structure all that around having those dogs, and those dogs, number one, they had something against everybody's crotch, because that was like
that
number one.
That was actually one of the notes I made, is the dogs really like chewing on balls.
Boy, do they. Actually, what I had was what was it? Well, I loved when she says sit and the two dogs sit down, and she's like, I was talking to you, to John earlier. But I think my thing was, he shot the dog. He deserved to have his balls bitten. Like, that dog
don't mess with Sophia's dogs.
No, that dog, those dogs were just missiles. And that, again, that action, the stunt people working with the dogs and like getting grabbed and flipped around and all this stuff. They had to run up the back and up the wall.
Yeah, up the wall.
That was awesome.
That was fun.
It was so good. But yeah, Halle Berry was great. It just wasn't in it enough. But I'm hoping that maybe her character comes back in Chapter 4, because they've kind of done this with characters. They introduce some stuff in 2, and then whoever was left can come back. And in this case, there wasn't really anybody left. So, well, except for the Bowery King, right? Lawrence Fishburne. And so now they have a history, and their history is relatively positive in that they don't instantly want to kill each other the second they see each other. But she
maybe
also
inflict pain on each other, but not necessarily kill directly.
Yes.
Like, she's as soon as he came in, she specifically shot him in the jacket, not in the head. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's a positive experience for them.
More positive than any of his other relationships in this world. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, pretty much.
But yeah, just to then have like that whole scene end with, all right, we drive out into the desert, and now he's got to walk through the desert, and Keanu Reeves had to do that in that damn suit, which I'm sure was not fun.
Oh, that was another note. This suit must be the most breathable material ever for John to wear it in the middle of the day in the desert.
So, and again, this is like, I get what they were going for with this, and this for me was the weakest part of the film, was from the end of that big action set piece with the dogs and Halle Berry to him returning to New York with his orders to kill Winston.
Yeah.
Only because it felt like, I don't know, it felt like there was nothing to really set this up ahead of time. Like we're told about the table, but we go from the table right to the one who sits above the table. There's always another layer, right? There's always a bigger fish.
Yeah.
And he's got to do this weird, like, again, it's the ritual of go out, walk through the desert, and maybe he'll find you, or maybe you die in the desert. And of course he finds him. And the actor that plays the elder, Saeed, I think it's Tagmawi, I believe. But
I'm sure you're pronouncing it better than I ever would.
I can't remember how to pronounce his name, but I have seen him in other stuff before. And I was like, he's got a great presence, and I liked him. But it's like this weird thing, and then he's got to chop his finger off to give him the, and it's, I don't.
It's a good thing John has good aim. Yeah. It's just one chunk, just finger completely. I probably would have stabbed the middle of my hand somehow.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
If I was in the same situation.
But this is more of the world building that they're doing, right, and giving us what's going on here. But it just feels, I almost feel like it was one level too far to go in this movie, to expand. Like we went we went a circle or a half a circle out farther than we really had been prepared for. So again, is it bad? No, but it's something that I might not have done in this one.
Yeah, it could have been potentially tightened up. Oh, but yeah, I personally didn't have much of an issue. I just found it kind of interesting the fact they went all the way to the Moroccan desert just to be sent right back to New York.
That's kind of part of it too, is like,
yeah,
he went through all of that just to go back to New York to kill Winston, which we already knew the table wanted him gone anyway.
Yeah.
So it's like that could have been done. It could have been something that Halle Berry's character maybe tells him, like, well, I've been told that this is what you do to get back in, and you can cut that part of it. It's my only real complaint about the entire movie, because we get back to New York and things just go right back to action. Like, he goes and sees Winston and it just gets better and better. But man,
basically it's like the phrase "this all could have been in an email" kind of comes to mind.
Like, you could have texted me this.
Just email the elder, get the orders back, go from there.
Yeah,
there you go.
Save yourself some frequent flyer miles. But we had, so in the second movie, we have that awesome climactic fight in the Hall of Mirrors. That's very Enter the Dragon reminiscent, right? It was definitely inspired by Enter the Dragon. And you can tell Keanu and Stahelski and the writers are Bruce Lee fans, because they're always putting in little homages to Bruce Lee. That's where, like, him fighting Boban at the beginning of the movie is very reminiscent of Bruce Lee in Game of Death fighting Kareem.
Yep.
And we had
there's a lot of references, like homages in this movie,
which I loved.
Even
the stuff, like, I'm sure there's a bunch of them I didn't even pick up on, because it's maybe something that I haven't seen or I haven't seen in 20 years or something like that. But I was trying to think, I'm like, okay, they're going to do something in this climax that's going to be different. What are they going to do? And when he walks into that room for the first time to meet Winston with all the glass, I was like, oh, this is a cool room, which apparently cost like $4 million to build.
Yeah.
Which,
but like, one thing that it's like, we had there, I know that you and a couple other movie podcasts have different terms you like to throw on, like how things are made of explodium and stuff like that.
Yeah.
In this world, glass apparently has the cutting prowess of cardboard.
Well, in this world, glass is either tenuously held together and can break at a moment's notice, but not actually cut anybody, or it is the hardest substance on earth and you cannot get through it no matter what.
Yeah, it's either bulletproof or it's just might as well be tissue paper.
Yeah, basically. Which really makes this whole room made of glass an interesting place to set your final
because
fight.
it's like, okay, which is it going to be? Is this going to be the one that doesn't break, or
it's a crapshoot. You never know when you throw somebody into the glass wall, what's going to happen. Luckily, they put all the strong stuff on the outside, so nobody fell to their death.
Although that would have made things a little bit easier.
It would have. There was the whole scene where the two underlings, they're credited as Shinobi number 1 and Shinobi number 2, and they are two of the guys actually from the raid. The raid 2. I recognized one, and I was like, "Oh, I bet you these guys were in the raid." And sure enough, I looked, and they were, and they're Indonesian martial artists, and they're phenomenal. But that scene when they first bring him in and they're just throwing him into the glass containers over and over, which, by the way, was a stunt double, but it was really good work. Like, they never gave away that it wasn't Keanu. The guy moved like Keanu did, but after the third thing they threw him into, I'm like, okay, that's not Keanu Reeves, because come on. Speaking of, though, I just remembered this. I read one where somebody asked him in an interview if he did any of which stunts he did of his own, and if he did the car one where he gets hit by the car, and he's like, I mean, I could, but then I'd end up in the hospital, so no, that one wasn't, because that one, like, he gets hit by the car and then immediately gets hit by another car. Like, John Wick is I don't know what John Wick is made out of, but I need some of it.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, just listing the injuries that this guy has sustained is making my knees hurt.
Yeah, I know.
Jeez.
But a movie like this, one of the cool things about it is that it is, it's story tying together action set pieces, right? We kind of know the rough cadence of how the film is going to go. We're going to get some story, we're going to get some dialogue, and then boom, action. And the action's going to go and go and go. And then we get a breather before the next action scene goes on. And sometimes that breather is very short, and then you get the next one and you're exhausted by the end of it. And sometimes you get a little bit more. But every one of these action scenes, I don't know how Chad Stahelski has continued to evolve and innovate action and make something that is, it doesn't feel like you're watching the same movie. It's very easy to be like, yeah, John Wick Chapter 3, Chapter 4, come on, you're just making the same movie and over and over. They're not. They're not making the same movie. They're doing new shit all the time.
Yeah, and I think part of that for this one at least is the fact that there's still a lot of gunfights and everything like that, but the iconic ones are sword fights.
Mm-hmm.
That you have an entire faction of assassins that don't use guns. They're using all swords.
Yeah, think about that first action scene when he runs away from the guys in, I guess it must be Chinatown or part of that.
Yeah.
And he runs into that room, closes the door, and he's surrounded by all those revolvers. And he takes the time to take them apart, to put the right chamber in for the bullet that he wants to shoot and all of that, which is a cool scene because I'm like, he's taking the time to do all this while these guys are chasing him down.
Although I was a little bit disappointed with that scene specifically because they take all the time to show his prowess with how he knows the mechanics of a gun and how to put it together and tear them apart, get everything he needs, and he would use it for one shot and it's never seen again.
Yeah. Well,
it's like,
I will say in his defense though, he didn't know what was going to be in there, and there was only so many bullets in that room to begin with.
Yeah, but even so, there's at least 6 bullets on that rack.
It's true.
He could have loaded more in there. It's like I was hoping. I mean, I can understand if you used it for like 5-6 shots or whatever, and then discard it. But the fact that he just loads in one bullet, shoots the guy in the doorway, throws it away, and runs, I was slightly disappointed with that. But that's.
But then we got that
nitpicking.
really, really cool fight with all the knives and the axes and everything that just kept going. Like, okay, so that gave me shades of the hallway fight from Daredevil. Not quite the same, but it gave me shades of that in that it just sort of kept going. And when you thought that the scene was going to be done, there was like another moment and something else would happen. And it's that just being tired by the end of it. That's that kind of scene where you're just like, okay, I need to sit down. I need to catch my breath. And then, we're still going? Okay, movie's going to keep going. Sure. And also brutal. Because like, it's not just stabbing them with the knife. It's like stabbing with the knife and then beating on it to drive it in further. Like, ugh. And
one note I had is in all caps, dude, why in the eye?
Oh yes. So I did too. I think why in the eye is exactly what I wrote. I'm like, why? No, I don't. And the slow, because it's coming too. As soon as he starts to move that knife, you're like, oh no.
Yeah,
Yep,
you kind of hope that it's like, okay, go. He's able to move it away. It's like, nope, it's going. Oh no, that's in.
Yeah, that's all the way in that eyeball.
Yeah.
And he goes from that to an action sequence in the horse stable.
Yes.
Which
and death by weaponized horses is the note I made for that one.
Well, so I had somehow I both did and didn't see the horse foo kill coming, because the first time he slaps the horse and it kicks the guy, I was not prepared for it, and yet I knew somebody was getting kicked by a horse. And it was also really nice that the rain stopped by the time he left the stable. If you noticed, he ran in, it was pouring, and he comes out and it's dry.
Continuity.
And then they do a chase scene on horseback with motorcycles. Like, it's not very long, but they did it, and I loved it. I thought that was great. Of him just riding off and then beating people. Yeah, it's just more interesting stuff. And I don't know how much legitimacy there is, but I think they worked in the horse riding thing because Keanu Reeves can ride a horse.
Yeah, I read that trivia as well. It's like they tried to tailor some of the action sequences to the actors in them, and he's, according to the trivia, legitimately a horse rider. So.
Yeah. So you get that, and then he ends up at that's when he goes to the ballet. I think it was after that. But then, he goes to Morocco. He comes back. Now we've got the whole fight with the Table's army that shows up in their armor.
Yeah.
And he has, first of all, we get the guns, lots of guns.
Yes.
That made
note
me
of that.
Then we get like the gear up scene, right? Where they go to the vaults and they open the big vault door, and Winston goes in, pours himself a drink, and here's John and Sharon, and they go through and they find the weapons, and he's telling them about this and all that. And I love, they've made some armor improvements since you were last working. And they go out there, and you get like, they're shutting down the power to everything, turning on the green lights and kind of the night vision and all of this. And immediately,
which is supposed to be an homage to the Matrix.
A little bit of that, yeah.
Yeah.
And then you get the first shootout, and it's like, nope, these 9mm aren't doing anything. They're just bouncing off of this armor.
Yeah, you have Keanu's, like, he does his typical, double tap to the chest, shot to the head, moves on, and then it's like, oh, crap, they're still moving. Just that expression is like, crap.
there again, though, that is the magic that Keanu Reeves has, is he tells you so much in that moment with just a glance. Like, he does his thing, and he turns around, and he comes back, and it's like, what? This? Like, it's so well done, and and then I loved his workaround. He figured out the weak point was the neck.
Just like pull the helmet up and shoot him in the neck a couple times, or shoot into the helmet, which
again brutal.
Just brings a whole new dynamic to it, because we're so used to him being very efficient with his shots, usually double tap to the chest, one shot to the head, move on. Now he has to get in close and like get behind the armor and everything. So I liked that escalation of the action. To mix it up.
And there was
they go.
There was a better use of reloads and things, that realism in that fight, in that action sequence, which I did appreciate. But you're right, like, he's using what he already knows and what we've seen him do, but now he's got to augment that. He's got to hit him a couple of times to slow him down so he can close the distance and get the killing blow. So it happens. And it was a really well done action sequence, but then they go back, like, we need more firepower, a little armor improvement, and so that's when they bust out the shotguns.
Yeah, I love Winston's reaction when he says, "We need more firepower." He's like, "Well," without saying a thing, he just like motions with his hands. It's like, take what you need.
Yeah, do what you got to do. So then they bust out the shotguns, and him and Sharon go back out, and it's that's when John's like, okay, this works a little bit better.
Yeah. And it's actually at this point specifically that I have one issue.
Okay.
The scene where John, just before John ditches the shotgun, he's fighting against 3 people. And mind you, they're showing him reload. He's doing like an actual like tournament style reload, like quad and double reload with the shotgun as he's going along. But he does the last reload that they show, fires 4 shots at 2 guys on the catwalk, and then goes towards this one guy, shoots him a total of 6 times, 3 of which are after he's already fallen over the railing and is falling to the ground below. And it's like, first of all, that's 4 more shots than the gun can actually hold, assuming it was fully reloaded. And the first 3 shots probably killed the guy already. It's
I did
a
notice
little
that.
excessive.
That felt out of character for John to shoot the guy as he's falling over the railing. Like, the guy's already been shot twice and he's falling. He's not getting up from that. But
I mean, but granted, that's the most egregious I saw in the movie, and again, the only reason why it was so noticeable is because wasn't a common thing throughout the other two movies.
Right.
So,
but it's still like it makes for a really it was a really good action sequence that ends with like, all right, okay, he's tired, and then he's got to fight the two shinobis in the glass room.
yes,
and that whole thing goes on, and the dialogue there where they start talking to him, that they apparently came up with that on the day.
Yeah, because supposedly, like, when he falls, there's some trivia that says that Keanu was supposed to get right back up after he falls,
And he slipped.
and yeah, he was just tired out from filming all that day, so he's like takes a little bit of time to get up, and he makes it into like this comedic moment where he's like, "I got it, I'm coming." Gets up, walks past him, and although there's a callback in that scene too, because when he went into the Russian theater, they specifically asked him to take off his belt.
Yes.
Right after that, he takes his belt off and uses that to fight the shinobis, and it's like, that's why. So
all he needs is a belt, and he can take those two guys on, and it's
he's literally killed people with number 2 pencils.
Yep. Yes.
So, but I was also amused how even the two shinobi were fanboying over him too.
They were, and that's the dialogue that apparently they came up with on the day, and one of them had been an English teacher in Indonesia, so he was able to translate it on set. But they came up with this idea of having that going on, and then having John at the end of it say, "Be seeing you," because that's kind of his thing, right? That's sort of almost his catchphrase, but him saying that to them in Indonesian and walking away. Like, yes, he at least can get by on like yet another language that he knows.
But I also do think it's interesting how is like almost because for the two shinobi, they weren't really trying to kill John. They were just it just seemed like they were just excited to fight him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all they wanted to do, because once it's clear that John beat them, that's it. They're left alive because they didn't. It seems like they didn't really have any real intention on killing John in the first place, so he didn't really need any intention on killing them.
Yep, and that's sort of, again, there's John's code that involved in that. Plus, there you can add the layer of like Zero. They were students of Zero, and Zero basically told them, you don't kill him, kind of thing. But they still wanted to fight him anyway. Yeah. So it's like there's that level to it, and then he gets to Zero, and then they have their fight, which is phenomenal, and it just goes, and it's long, but it's so well done, and it's in, again, just like with the Shinobis, these last two fights are in that glass room.
Yeah,
you can't hide anything in that room, like.
Yeah,
your acting, your choreography, and your performances have to be spot on, because you can't hide anything in that room. Everything is wide open.
Yeah, and like especially in that fight as well, I get the feeling that this is where Zero's fanboying kind of was his downfall, because you look in that fight, there are multiple times where he could have gotten a killing blow against John, and instead did hilt to the face or something like that, something that's less than lethal. Because I just got this sense that he want the Shinobi, he wanted the fight to go on because he was just so excited to fight John.
Yep.
And then eventually is like, oh, John's trying to kill me. I'm already dead. Never mind.
Yeah. Oh, it's too late. And the way that ended too, with the sword, and he stops it with the glove, and then you hear the sword squeaks through the glove, because again, he's trying to hold it in place, but that glove is probably got sweat and blood on it, and that's something I can't think of another time I've seen something like that in a movie, and I thought that was really cool. Of that makes sense. He stopped the blade, but he can just slide right through that glove and stab him with it anyway. And it was, again, brutal, like the rest of this movie, very brutal. But it was something new that I hadn't really seen before, so I kind of liked that.
Yeah.
And it's just...
And then Zero at the end, they're just even when he's dying, he was just so freaking excited that he got to fight John.
Yep. And then we have the fallout of the adjudicator basically goes to Winston, and Winston's like, well, look, you might keep coming after me, but it is New York City. And like I got connections beyond all this. And so they sort of come to a stalemate. And that's when Winston turns on John, shoots him, and knocks him off the building, which again, it's like, what is this guy made of for him to fall off that damn building?
Yeah, jeez.
And hit the and not be dead, like dead.
Yeah.
It was something else, and we get our sort of sequel baiting ending with him getting dumped in front of the Bowery King, who's scarred now. He's got his open wounds.
Yeah, we missed the Bowery King's punishment, which was 7 cuts because of the 7 bullets that he gave John.
Yeah,
and well, never mind. I was going to say something potentially rude, but I'll never mind. So yeah, he's got all the scars all over him stuff because apparently, he has some level of plot armor as well. And the 7 cuts didn't kill him.
Nope, I guess not.
So,
yep. And so my guess is we're going to see John probably teaming up with the Bowery King in Chapter 4. And
probably.
It's
taking
curious.
The fight to the high table, probably.
Well, to the high table, but also what's going to happen with John and Winston. Because there's going to be some fallout there that's going to be very interesting because Winston and Sharon both really took care of John and were on his side, but they turned on him there. But it's a question of, did they really turn on him, or did they know something might happen?
Yeah.
Are they going to be able to somehow mend fences, or is he just going to not? I'm really curious to see what happens with Chapter 4 now because of that.
Yeah, and in my mind, Winston is much more of a strategist. So he's thinking a couple moves ahead. It's like, well, if I do this to John, this displays this kind of reaction, whatever. And he's thinking about, because again, he could have, if he really wanted John dead, just for sure dead, he could have just shot him in the head. But instead, he shot him in the bulletproof jacket. And yes, he fell off the roof, but he kind of, again, assumed that somehow John would live or whatnot. So he has some kind of plan that still involves John. And I do think that there's going to be a little bit of animosity between them to start off with in Chapter 4. But that Winston's going to explain, I had to do it this way so that you could have a chance to take the fight to the high table.
Yeah. Yep, definitely.
I have a feeling that's going to be what's going to go on.
There has to be something there.
Yeah.
This movie has a good number of clippable moments, and I did capture a few things, and I'm sure you're going to want to hear them. I'm going to start with just a selection of things I got of the Bowery King, because Lawrence Fishburne just having a blast. This was a little touch of angry acting where he just yells, "I am the Bowery!" And I liked that. That was kind of cool. When the adjudicator walks up and he's got all his pigeons, I loved his talking about them like they're the internet. And
you see rats with wings, but I see the internet.
And
can't track it, can't hack it, can't trace it.
Can you get disease from it?
Well, I wouldn't recommend that you eat them.
I just loved that. When she comes back, when they come back, the adjudicator, and again, the Bowery King don't care, right? He does not care at all, and so the adjudicator comes back, and he's just like,
"Climb down off your high table and go yourself."
Winston would not say. Winston said as much. But more
politely.
Yes, much more politely. And Bowery King's just like, I don't care, man, get out of here. Yeah. And then finally at the end when John gets dumped in front of him by was it TikTok Man is the way they credit him as, Jason Matsuzakis. He dumps him in front of him. And I love that the dog was there too.
Followed him there.
And immediately jumped up on the little sofa and sat down. And then he just says,
"'Cause I am really pissed off."
I liked that a lot. Yeah, just give me more Lawrence Fishburne, just more. I want it.
Yeah.
There was the TikTok man at the beginning, which this is that John Wick world, and I kind of like that they put this at the beginning to sort of like reset and remind you what this world is like, where you've got it's New York City. There are people like him sitting there muttering or yelling at themselves on the street. Like, yeah, I have witnessed this. And you get to a point, sadly, where you kind of block it out and you don't notice them because it's...
Which is their strength in the movie is that they can go unnoticed.
And they use that to their advantage. And then when he just looks at John...
No time to dilly-dally, Mr. Wick!
And I just loved that. Plus, I don't know anyone else that says dilly-dally. And it's a term that's just not used enough. Halle Berry. They're talking about... And again, this leaves me with questions I want answered. Like, what happened with her daughter? What's the history between her and John? Because something happened with her daughter that John helped to clean up. Or something.
What I'm assuming is that the marker that she gave to John was so that John could hide her daughter from her in order to protect her and not tell her where her daughter is. That was the impression I got from their conversation.
It was something.
So John knows where her daughter is, but she doesn't want to know in order to protect her daughter.
Yes.
Something like that.
There was something, but it was the way she delivered. And this again, you hire somebody with the acting chops of a Halle Berry, and you get...
Because sometimes you have to kill what you love.
Because it's an emotional moment, and it worked. It worked for me. And then a little while later, after her boss, in his own way to test her, shoots the dog in the bulletproof vest.
Yeah.
But he still shot the dog, which means immediately you're done. I'm done with you. But this exchange between Sophia and John is just epic.
Sophia, don't.
He shot my dog.
I get it.
I love that.
Yeah.
If anyone's going to get it, it's John. There's the line earlier with the director. It was in Russian where the director says to him, like, all of this over a puppy? And his response is like, well, it wasn't just a puppy.
Yeah. It was also a car.
Yeah. So the whole thing like is going on. You got what is Smash? Oh, this was the director. I really liked the poetic nature of the way she worded this.
How can you smash the mountains? How can you bury the ocean?
I love that. The smash the mountain.
Yeah.
How could you possibly go against the high table? You know, and using
guns.
The phrase smash,
lots of guns.
Smash the mountain
Sorry.
And bury the ocean was so good.
Yeah.
When he gets to Morocco, I just like this guy. He's sort of the Sharon of the Moroccan Continental.
Welcome to Casablanca, Mr. Wick. Thanks.
Plus John, again, polite to a fault. Like he still says thank you.
Yeah.
That cracked me. Thanks. Like it's a genuine. He's like he wasn't expecting to get that welcome, and it's just that genuine.
Well, yeah, because of what immediately happened before that.
Yeah.
She got jumped by a couple guys, and that's what he was expecting.
Yep. And I did like when the guy comes out, and he's like, he's to be left alone, but he's excommunicado. Yeah, no, don't worry about it. Like,
yeah, doesn't matter.
And then there was this one, which I believe was in the trailer as well.
Guns. Lots of guns.
a nice Matrix callback. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
If only he had said it to Lawrence Fishburne instead of Ian McShane, that would have been perfect. But alas, let's see. This one just says pretty good.
Hey, John. That was a pretty good fight, huh?
Yeah.
like you said, Zero's
fanboying to the end.
Yep. That was the cherry on top because he's genuinely like, it was a pretty good fight. And I just love, again, Keanu giving so much with a single word. He just kind of looks at him like, I mean, yeah. It's such a good exchange. This was Ian McShane. And this was the scene. So when John comes back to New York and he first goes to see Winston and they're in the glass room and Winston pulls the pistol out and is like, basically knows, yeah, you're here to kill me. I get it. That's what they sent you to do and all this. And it was, and this is the moment. This is why I'm not 100% sure that what he did at the end of the movie was a full on heel turn so much as, like you said, sort of a calculated thing was, you can play it either way, but with this exchange where he's like, look, who do do you want to be John who loved his wife and had a dog, or do you want to be the boogeyman, the Baba Yaga, the last thing people see? And then he says,
who do you wish to die as, Jonathan?
Who do you wish to die as? Because like it's inevitable that he's going to die as one of those two. And
either peacefully as John or violently as John Wick.
Yep. Which is why it could be a very calculated move on Winston's part to have gone through all of that, knowing that, he can turn John and then just get rid of him, or genuinely caring enough to get him to not just kill him on sight. Because I also like the line, I didn't cap it, but I like the line of, I'd rather be killed by a friend than by an enemy. Because that felt very of this world. And then I got one Lance Reddick, and it's right at the end.
Well played, sir.
And now I've got that one that's going to live on my soundboard forever. When something happens, and I can just, oh.
Well played, sir.
Little hat tip. If you enjoy action films, the John Wick series is amazing. And the only reason I hadn't watched Chapter 3 until now was just waiting to do it for this show, quite honestly.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm going to be able to wait to watch Chapter 4. I think I'm going to have to just watch it, because it's just, so, like, to be able to make John Wick, which is essentially almost like an independent film in a lot of ways. It's very small production. And to take what they did there and expand it and make 2 and now 3 sequels bigger, but somehow and interesting and change things and evolve them without losing what they started with, I think is really, really cool. Now, granted, the further they go along, the more superhuman John Wick becomes, but at this point, I don't really care anymore.
Escalation of action. So,
but I can park my brain because everybody's like that. This isn't our world. This is some weird alternate universe that just happens to inhabit the same. Everybody looks the same. But it's so much fun. I'm really glad that you got to watch this, and I'm glad that I finally got to watch this. So this is a good pick.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, definitely enjoying the series because it's action movies, but it has so much more to it. It has a little bit more groundedness to it, which is refreshing. And not having guns that just have infinite ammo all the time. Because I started to realize that one of the best parts about the first 2 movies, the things that made the action sequences so exciting, was ammo management.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, this gun is empty. Do I have another magazine, or do I need to grab another gun, or do I need to grab a different weapon? Or that's what I think makes this series so exciting. So,
and stuff like this happens. We get these kind of, and it's not necessarily always one film, but there's usually, you can point to one film that sort of takes a genre and turns it on its head. In the 90s, slasher movies and a lot of horror movies were kind of going in a certain direction. Scream came along, and while it wasn't the first self-referential slasher film, it set the tone for that Gen X, early millennial type of horror film that would be tongue-in-cheek and realize the ridiculousness of it. And it spawned a whole bunch of sequels, but also copycats and lesser versions of it. but it gave us something new. And then in the early 2000s, we got the Bourne Identity, and it changed the spy thriller action movie. It was no longer the Pierce Brosnan James Bond that were getting like bloated and kind of overdone, and it stripped it back down. It's sort of like punk music in the 70s, and the way that rock and like Led Zeppelin and that kind of stuff was getting crazier and more intricate, and you had all these prog bands, and then, you know, guys were just like, I just want to play some hard, fast music, and you get punk, and it strips back down. That's what this movie did. The first John Wick was that. It took the action genre, it stripped it down, it made it very basic. It took the camera and backed it up and gave us a different view of action, ammo management, a little more grounded in, at least closer to what reality would be if you were in that situation. And we've seen so many copycats and so many variations on that, whether it's and what I liked is not all of them have been direct copycats. There's a lot of that sort of, kind of like Die Hard did the same thing too in the 80s. And then you had that spate of movies that were Die Hard on a boat, Die Hard in a hockey arena, Die Hard and, whatever. There was a lot of these like John Wick-esque movies, right? Nobody was one that luckily didn't just copycat John Wick. It just took that sort of the seed.
Kind of took the formula.
Yeah.
And
took the kernel.
Turned it a little bit.
But you had like Pig with Nick Cage that a lot of people would call, John Wick, but with a pig. And it wasn't, but there was some base DNA in there, and then they took it, they went in a different direction. So that's how influential a movie like this can be in less than a decade. To have John Wick with blah, blah, blah type stuff going on. And so, but to not rest on their laurels with that, and to actually like keep innovating and evolving. And to this point, Chad Stahelski has 4 directing credits to his name that are finished products. And they are John Wick Chapter 2, Chapter 3, and Chapter 4. And yet they don't feel like the same movie. They feel they're in the same world, they're the same character, but each one of them is a little bit different, and they bring something new to it. And you get, while continually having that dichotomy of John versus John Wick and his assassin personality and persona versus sort of trying to leave that behind, and all the homages and Easter eggs and things that they throw in, and it's great stuff, and I'm really excited for Chapter 4.
Yeah, so am I.
So, it's I'm really glad that we got to do this. Now you have a show you're actually going to be going to do here shortly.
Yeah, like less than an hour.
Called The Part-Time Gamers. Remind people where that one is.
Yes, Part-Time Gamers podcast. You'll be able to find that on my Twitch channel. We're going to be recording live in a little less than an hour, actually. Twitch.tv/Cyrenex. If you are a person with a full-time life, but you still enjoy games, Part-Time Gamers podcast is for you. We talk about games that you can play to completion or satisfaction within a relatively short amount of time. So we're on our 3rd episode of our monthly theme of Old Made New. So we're going to be talking about the Atari 50 collection today.
Nice. Very cool. And I dig that, because not everybody has time to, I love when I see games like a new Diablo or a new Elder Scrolls or something come out where it's a big game. It's going to take a bunch of time. But sometimes you just need to find those casual games, those quick games you can pick up, play for a little while, get through them. And that's what and you guys are great talking about them too. So the Part-Time Gamers. This show records Sunday nights, typically around 8 p.m. Eastern time. That can vary from week to week, but we try to be around there. Show comes out on Wednesdays as a podcast, so definitely you can get it there. Anywhere you get your podcasts, or go to tvstravis.com, and you can find links to this show and other shows that I work on. I have a classic television podcast that I'm a part of called Those Were the Days. Let's Watch Highlander. I co-host a podcast on all horror movies called Gore. You can also find things like merchandise. I've got my logo on a few silly things if you want to get a hat or a T-shirt. Or there's a link to a Patreon there. And there's a Patreon for this show, patreon.com/WYHS, or go to the link on tvstravis.com for as little as $1 an episode. You can support the show that way. And obviously, word of mouth, ratings, and reviews, always helpful. I appreciate those all. Cyranex, thank you so much for being here this week. This has been a ton of fun. And
Indeed. Yeah, thanks for having me.
We're going to sit down and have a conversation about John Wick Chapter 4 at some point after we get to watch it.
Oh,
Whether it might not be an episode of the show, but we're going to have that conversation because we definitely. So until then, now next week I have Gerald from Two Peas on a Podcast is coming back, and he hasn't been on for a little while, and we are going to talk about another action movie from David Cronenberg called A History of Violence with Viggo Mortensen. It's actually based on a graphic novel, and I have not seen it before, and I'm really excited to watch this one because I've heard a lot about it. So that's coming up next week, and I got some more fun stuff down the road as well. So that'll be next week. Gerald Morris from Two Peas on a Podcast will be back, and we'll be talking about that. That'll be the next episode. Until then, Cyranex, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, sir.
Tons of fun. People get out and check out Part-Time Gamers. It's a good show. And until next time, enjoy your movies.
Well, sometimes you gotta cut a motherfucker.